Hi, and thanks for stopping by my channel, A Square Pillow Isn't Square, the place where you will learn anything and everything you wanted to know about home deck sewing. Today's tutorial is about how to make a soft, round, boxed pillow or cushion. Unlike foam cushions that are more rigid, often have welt at the top and bottom, and are far more structured, this is a soft, comfortable, round pillow that has a boxing strip and is perfect for sofas, bedrooms, and especially for pet beds.
All right, so here we have our round pillow form. This is, I made this one. They're a little bit harder to find round forms now. So if you can't find one or you can't find one in the size that you want, just make one. So the next thing we're gonna do is figure out how big to make our top and bottom circle and our boxing strip, because as you can see, this is a knife edge pillow form, but we're gonna turn it into a boxed pillow cushion. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is get our total circumference measurement all the way around this pillow. As you know, if you've seen any of my videos about how to measure for a pillow cover, I like to take a soft tape measure and just snug it up gently. If you just wrap it loosely, the cover's going to look a little bit too big, and if you pull really tight, it's going to be too small. So I like to just snug it up a little bit, and in my case, I've got a total measurement around the pillow is 35 inches. So make a note of that number. The next thing you're going to do is decide how wide you want your boxing strip. There's no rules here. You can have a really wide boxing strip, you can have a very narrow boxing strip. I'm going to go with a standard kind of size. I'm going to go with 2-inch boxing strip. So we already know that our boxing strip now has to be 2 inches wide, which means we'll cut it at 3 inches since I like a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides. And so the way to determine the top measurement, you take that total number we got, which was 35, and kind of imagine if it's 35 inches around, 2 inches of it is taken up with boxing on this side, and 2 inches is taken up with boxing on this side. So you're going to take off a total of 4 inches off your total number. That, of course, varies with how big your boxing strip is. And then divide that number by 2, because in this total circumference, half of it's the top, half of it's the bottom. So we are going to have a 2-inch wide boxing strip. So I'm going to cut that at 3 inches. And that ended up being 15.5 inches for my finished top and bottom. So I'm going to cut my pillow top and bottom 16.5 inches. Hope that made sense. Okay, I want to pause here for a moment. I know I randomly just said, oh, I'm going to make a 2-inch boxing strip. But let me just take 1 second to talk about how to determine how wide your boxing strip can be when you're using a soft-sided form like this. Now, it's a little bit different if you have a really rigid foam-based cushion where you have very sharp edges and it's consistent in the thickness. But when you've got rounded edges like this, you don't want to go too thick with your boxing strip, or the top edge just doesn't really fill out. So, 2 inches, I don't know if you can see it here, 2 inches is probably the minimum boxing strip I would do for this pillow. But, you might want to just give it a little push, kind of measure the thickness. This one is about 4 inches in total. But again, I don't want to go all the way up to 4 inches. This top won't fill out. So I'd say this one could be anywhere from 2.5 to 3 inches wide and still be acceptable. The other thing to think about is the wider you make your strip, the smaller your circles are going to be. And let me show you why that is, especially if you're working with an existing form or an existing pet bed like this. The total distance around your finished cushion is going to be consistent. No matter how narrow or wide your strip is, you're still going to have the same total distance. So the wider your strip is, the smaller your top and bottom is going to be, because it's going to squeeze it more like this. So for instance, I determined that my distance around my pillow is 35 inches. If I do 2-inch boxing strip on each side, I take off my 4 inches, That leaves me 31 inches for my top and my bottom. So now, when I divide that in half for my top and bottom, I'm going to have a 15-inch finished circle. But if I take that same 35 inches and I decide I want 3-inch boxing strip, it's going to be a total of 6 inches off that distance. That's only going to give me 29 inches. So now my circle went from 15.5 inches to 14.5 inches. So I'm going to have a thicker cushion, but I'm going to have a smaller cushion. Also, as far as how long this piece is, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can just cut it longer than you need, fit it to your circle, and then seam it where they meet, or you can do it mathematically. To do it mathematically, you're going to take your finished pillow top size, which we determined was 15.5 inches. That's the diameter of the circle. In order to find the circumference around the circle, you just multiply that number by pi, pi. Pi is a symbol that represents the number 3.14. So 15.5 times 3.14. Calculator. 15.5 times 3.14. My total strip needs to be 48.67. Okay, that's really a hard fraction. Plus we have to add seam allowances where our join is. I'm going to round that 48.67 up to 48.75 finished. I'm going to cut my strip at 49.75 in this case. Diameter times pi plus your seam allowances. Easy breezy. Alright, the way that I cut out my circles is whatever my finished cut is, in my case it's 16.5 inches, I divide that number in half and I put a pin on my soft tape measure right at that number. So in my case, 8.25 is half of 16.5, and I will just take a marking pen and spin my tape measure around and have my marking pen follow it, and I will end up with a perfect circle, exactly the cut size that I want. And as you can see, I've got both of my layers together here, so I'm going to cut them both out at the same time. You know, the other thing that I like to do sometimes is mark my direction. So if you've got a direction or a nap and you want your pieces to be consistent, you can use a pin or a piece of chalk and mark your tops or your bottoms, however you want to do it. Another thing I also like to do is make some notches. And I'm going to quarter my circles just with a little notch. So this will be evenly divided in quarters, and I can line up my quarters when I am sewing my pillow so everything stays nice and even. Alright, I've got this notched. I'm going to mark this as my top. Need another pin. And these are ready to go. Now I cut my little boxing strip using the mathematical method. We're going to see how accurate this really is, because this is already cut exactly to size. I sewed my 1/2 inch seam. Another reason this is a nice way to do it is, do you remember how I quartered my circles? I'm going to also quarter my boxing strip, and this is going to help me line everything up perfectly so we don't have any torquing or stretching or anything like that, and everything is going to be nice and straight and fit perfectly. So my seam here is going to be one of my marks, So I'm going to do a clip on both ends. That's my halfway mark. Now I'm going to open that up. You can finger press open your seam allowance. You're going to want that, or press it with an iron. You're going to want that flat. And now line up your little notches onto your seam, and on both edges of your strip we are going to cut our quarters. Now we're going to take this to the machine and see how nicely everything lines up. I'm going to pin my boxing strip to my circle, right sides together, at the 4 places that I have made notches. Hopefully, if I did my math right, they should all end up lining up perfectly as I sew around. Okay, I guess it doesn't matter where I stop and start. I'm just going to start. And I'm going to just make some little clips as I go. You just don't want to clip beyond your 1/2 inch seam allowance. And just line up your edges. I have tried doing it the other way with the circle on top, and I found that that's more likely to misshape the circle. So I'm just gonna do it this way. I think it's gonna fit nicely. You can already tell. See how it's just fitting in there? And the nice thing about pinning it this way in quarters is you can kind of ease it as you go as well. I mean, there you go. So we're just going to do that all the way around. Also, another tip, make sure you don't pull on this bottom layer. Being that this is cut on a circle, there's going to be some edges that are stretchier than others, and you don't want to misshape your circle. So just let your bottom layer just move around without any tension on it, and any of the tension you have will be on this top boxing layer to fit. You don't want to do anything to that bottom one to make your circle misshapen. And I know doing these little clips takes a few minutes, but it really prevents any flat areas or misstitched areas, because it just allows you to line up your edges so nicely and evenly that the few minutes it takes to make these clips is well worth it. I mean, you guys, that fit absolutely perfectly. No guessing, no trial and error. And now I know for sure that when I fit my bottom piece onto my boxing, that I'm not going to have any problems with that either, because everything lines up so nicely. So all you do is get your other piece and line up your 4 notches, and again, the same way, you're going to flip it where your boxing strip is on top and do the exact same thing. Now this time though, don't forget to leave an opening where you're going to put your pillow insert in. I want to make sure the opening is big enough that I can get that pillow form in there, but no bigger than need be. So I'm probably going to leave just a little bit less than 25% of my pillow, but I'm just going to finish going around this, and I'm going to hand sew it closed. got my pillow in here, and the easiest way I found to get a nice hand stitch line is fold in your clipped edge along your seam allowance. In my case, it's about 1/2 inch. And then fold this one in along your 1/2 inch. I have too many pins sticking me. And then just kind of squeeze them together like that. I take out the pins. Okay. I'm going to whip stitch that in place next. Okay, I have a double thread. I always start by coming up in that direction with my knot. Make sure my start point is nice and straight, and I am just going to catch a little bit of this back edge and a little bit of the front right near the top. A little bit of the back edge near the top. I'm just going to do that all the way around. All right, if you're doing a boxing strip with a zipper, it's easiest on a round top cushion to just do that in the center of the boxing strip instead of along one of the top or bottom edges where a curved edge is meeting a straight edge. So we're going to put it in the middle of our boxing strip. On a round cushion, I'll usually take about 25% of the total boxing strip, and I will make that amount my zipper. So in my case, it doesn't have to be exact, but let's say my boxing strip's about 48 inches. 25% of that is 12 inches. So I'm going to cut a couple of 3-inch pieces, 12 inches plus a couple of inches on each end where we are going to attach our zippered strip to our the rest of our boxing strip. So I've got a couple of 14-inch pieces here. These are 14 inches by 3 inches wide. And then for the remainder of the strip, you're going to want the remaining 3/4 of the length of your boxing strip, and add a few inches onto that too. It's a lot easier to trim it down after your zipper's all put together than it is to come up short. Now get a zipper or cut a piece of zipper tape about the same length as your zipper strips. Alright, next thing you're going to do is take your little strips and fold them wrong sides together. You can press them or finger press them or iron them or just hold them together. But you're going to fold these pieces in half and put your zipper foot on and simply line up the fold on top of the teeth and stitch on the top along the edge of your teeth, like this. Put the needle down and get your tab out of the way. And simply turn it over and do the same thing. seriously all there is to making a zipper strip. All right, I'm being a little careless and rushing, but and these pins, by the way, are just marking my direction, so if I have a nap, my strips are going in the right direction. You can take a little more time than I am and just be super careful lining everything up. And then when you get to your tab, just get it out of the way. All right. There you go. Okay, there's our zipper strip. All right, now get your big piece of strip. Again, I'm checking my direction. I cut this a lot longer than it needed to be. I'm going to trim it down in a minute. And you'll see that these are going to line up perfectly now. They're the exact same size. And we're going to sew it on one end. Now at this point you don't need your zipper foot anymore. In fact, it's easier to do the rest of these steps with your regular foot. And another thing that I will often do give yourself a nice generous seam allowance. You don't want to cut this off too short. I will often take a scrap of fabric and fold it in half, and I will just sew over this strip. It just makes it a little bit smoother and easier on your machine to go over the zipper strip, and back nice and strong over that stress point. Alright, there's one end, and now all that's left to do is just cut this to the correct finished length, adding a nice generous maybe 1-inch seam allowance where this joint is going to be. So for instance, my strip needed to finish at 48 3/4. I'm going to add a 1-inch seam allowance, so I'm going to cut this total strip 50 3/4. Alright, I've cut my strip to the correct cut length. I'm going to line these up. I'm going to measure my 1-inch seam allowance, and remember, you got to be pretty accurate with this because this has to fit exactly onto your pre-cut round pillow top and bottom. There's my little reinforcement. Go. And when I put this on, the pillow, I will make sure that these seam allowances lay away from the zipper. Otherwise, if you try and fold against the zipper, that's not going to work real well. So just make sure they are folded away from your zipper on both ends. And we're just going to go put this on the exact same way. I'll go cut my 4 notches. I'll make this my center bottom of my pillow, and I'll fold it in half, and I'm just going to do my 4/4 and finish up the exact same way. That's all there is to the zipper strip, you guys. There you go, your simple little soft boxed pillow or cushion. Hope you like this video. There's lots of other great tutorials on here. If there's something specifically that you'd like me to make a video about, please just leave a comment or a message below. And if I can at all possibly show you how to do it, I'd be happy to do so. Thanks for watching, and happy sewing.